Hello and welcome everyone to Coffee with Kathleen. This is today's featured mug given to me by a friend. It is in fact a friend that knows that I was born in the 70s, but I am here for this resurgence of like 70s motif kind of things. And speaking of things that are going on and coming back, Repair Pal is once again going to be at Apex this fall/early winter, whatever time frame that is, end of October, beginning of November. So we would encourage you to come check us out. And I would also encourage you to come check me out. I will be speaking again this year. I will be teaching a class called Hire Ground. That's HIRE ground. And it's about how to attract, hire, and especially retain the best talent. So I'm looking forward to speaking there, and we're going to have a few different booth presence on the floor at Apex. So look forward to welcoming all of our shop, partner, industry, dealer, and just general friends while we're there in Vegas. Should be a great time. And with that, it's just me on the show today. I'm all by myself. I'm accompanied by this handsome fellow. I'm in my new office in Denver, Colorado. So I'm coming to you live from here. It still might sound a little empty in here, and that is because I am not fully unpacked, but I am in the middle of life change, which is good news because what are we talking about? We're talking about life changes together through this series. And so last time I was by myself, I talked about how to make a pause before you take a big change. And today, I think I would like to talk to you a little bit about what you do when you're working through your life plans and what happens when you encounter just a little bit or a lot of bit of difficulty, and in particular, difficult people, and how you can think about that and maybe manage that for yourself a little bit differently than you have in the past. Change happens whether we like it or not. And so the question is, what are we authoring for ourselves? What are we creating? And then how do we handle what comes up when we do that? And so I'm here to just share with you a little bit about what I know about these things, and hopefully give you some ideas about what you can do for yourself. So how to take advantage of opportunities that come your way by breathing a little life into them and creating a new opportunity for yourself to unfold so that you can be very yourself in every moment that you have. And when you are yourself and your best self, or a great version of yourself in these moments, you'll have an expanded capacity to handle difficulty as well. And that's the exciting part about it. So when my team asked me to do a little session on handling difficult people, I said, oh, sure, I'm happy to do this. And I am going to open in the way that I always open these difficult people kind of conversations, or difficulty kind of conversations, by giving you a little something to reflect on. And that something is, how do you deal with difficult people? My question to you would be, well, how do people deal with you? Because guess what? You are somebody else's difficult person. Just as I am somebody else's difficult person, maybe even yours, though I hope not. I don't really want to be difficult, right? And that's the thing. Many difficult people don't actually want to be difficult. Or if they are being difficult and they're doing it knowingly, they're being difficult because they're trying to achieve a particular outcome. So maybe as activists or as industry champions, we are sometimes difficult on Capitol Hill, or we're difficult in a given interaction because we're trying to create a specific outcome. But the result or the impact of that is a difficulty. And so when other people have goals that are different than ours, or even sometimes internal to our own companies, They may have the same exact goal as we do, but they have a different thought or idea about how to get there, or about how to express themselves, or about how to live their experience, or what their needs are. So in a given space, I could go around a room of people and I could ask everybody, what are your needs for this interaction? What do you hope to accomplish? And some of those needs would be in conflict. So, for example, some people might need someone to speak up because they can't hear very well. And other people might react badly to sharp noises, right? So, it's just one example of how people's needs can be in conflict, and then how we collectively work through those, and decide what we want to do with that. That's what defines how we take advantage of our opportunities and how we work through difficult situations. So, right now, if you're listening to this live, why don't you pop in the chat? How are you a difficult person for someone else? And so, how might that show up? And how do you recommend that people deal with you when you're difficult? That exercise of deciding how people should deal with you when you're difficult is going to tell you a lot about what you have on board to deal with external difficulties, people outside yourself that might be creating a difficulty for you, as you're trying to achieve your goals. And then as you think about handling difficult people, or perhaps difficult dogs who are barking in the background when you're trying to do a podcast, a question that you might ask yourself is, what particularly makes someone else difficult for you? And I will suggest to you that part of what makes someone difficult for you is always that you're probably holding something back when you're faced with these challenges. Because if we are perfectly well expressed in dealing with difficulties, and if we're able to lay everything out on the table and just tackle the difficulty, it's not a difficulty for very long. So usually, part of what makes a difficulty difficult is the fact that we are holding back, and that we are in some way hooked by the situation. So it's got us all wrapped up. And so one thing that we might want to practice doing, or try to do, or work with, or sit with, is to avoid being hooked. So we don't like to be uncomfortable. So a lot of us will take shortcuts to avoid discomfort. And for me, for example, a shortcut to avoid discomfort, for a really long period of time was, a lack of exercise, because I didn't like, feeling sore. I didn't like the exertion of being out of breath. I didn't like feeling that discomfort in my body that comes from exertion. So I avoided the exertion. And in fact, I have an autoimmune disorder that keeps my muscles from repairing themselves, with the speed of a normal person, normal, whatever that means. And I also carry with me a fair amount of pain, which fluctuates from day to day. That's a difficulty that I live with, and that is present no matter what I'm doing. But the degree to which that is present varies, and it actually varies based on my choices. So what happens is, when I exercise, when I eat absolutely correctly, when I do all of the right things, ultimately over the long term, that pain is diminished for me. And so there's a lot of great reasons for me to live cleanly and healthy, because ultimately I'll be able to avoid pain that way. But it's a little bit of a long game, because in the short term, that's not how I avoid short-term pain. So if you think about this little metaphor that I gave you from my own personal experience, where might you be avoiding things in the short term? Whereas, really leaning in and having a difficult conversation, or tackling that difficulty, would actually be, short term, painful or frustrating or irritating or otherwise, annoying. But by doing it, you actually in the long term create a better result for yourself. I just moved. I will tell you now, packing is really irritating and frustrating and annoying and painful at times. But I needed to go through that short-term thing So then that long term, I can be in this office and in this house and living in a new place where I can create life in a different space for myself. So, but step one really is just recognizing the first step, like with any practice of self improvement, and we talked about this last time, is just noticing where things come up. Are there particular triggers that make you more likely to feel uncomfortable or to be overall triggered? Knowing ahead of time what those things are, what those people are, what things people say, allow you to take some amount of necessary precaution, or at least to go into it eyes wide open, so you have a sense of control over what's about to happen. And, again, as with everything, any kind of mindfulness or meditation practice is going to be invaluable to you, because it allows you to be just a little more adept at recognizing those thoughts and those feelings that are running through you at any point in time. And with that, I'm going to take a sip of this from my ultra cool 1970s mug. Okay. Next, the second R is refraining. So refrain from indulging in the habit that causes you difficulty. And look, one of my habits is that I'm very reactive. And my gosh, if we are in an emergency, you are going to be so happy that I am a reactive person, because I will immediately like jump and drag you from, a burning building or something like that. And if you were my boss, you might be pretty happy that I'm reactive, because there would be some business problem and I can spring into action like this and I can solve that problem. And you'd be like, wow, so happy I work with this gal. But there are moments where when people are trying to explain things to me, or we're engaged in work that's not quite so critical or time sensitive or whatever, where that reactivity, boy, is it not that helpful in that moment. And so I have to refrain from constantly indulging in that immediate reactivity habit. So easier said than done, is oftentimes that habit feels like a burning urge, right? So when it's time for action, when it's time to do something, I feel it in here. I want to get it done. But just with practice, it tends to get easier and easier. And part of the refrain is also refraining from taking things personally. It's not about you all the time. And even if it is, it's really not about you. It's about some other person's experience of you. And there's a space in, other people, sharing or unfolding or going through a particular situation where you can just take a pause or a moment, a way to, refrain from what that first impulse is of the way that you were going to handle the difficulty, so that at the very least, hard times are going to happen, and hard times are going to happen to good people. Why? Because life is like that. Not for any other reason. People are going to be difficult to you. Why? Because life is like that, because they're like that. So you didn't do anything to manifest or create that. And even if you did, in your present moment, you're just wanting to work with that difficulty and to soften it somehow. And the best way to do that is to not take it personally and to see the difficulty outside yourself, so that you have the space and just a little bit of breathing room, just a little bit more recognition time, notice time, to kind of sit with it and then react, so that your best self is the one that's handling the problem, not the first reaction self, which is not always the best self in every situation. And then as you refrain, the third R is just relax. Relax into the situation. Think about, what you can do that brings a little bit of a sense of playfulness or happiness, or, kind of a different feeling to the situation. And that will enable you to, to really open up and to achieve what you want to achieve. And then finally, you get to the resolution step, and you can follow through this 4-step framework, which again is recognizing, refraining, relaxing. You've already done all that. And now you're ready for the resolution steps. And even when it's a situation that you've handled so many times before that you think that you can handle it the same way that you've always done, it helps you to continue to practice this framework, because you never know when some unique part of the challenge is going to come up. Like, for example, to use a traffic and car-based metaphor, because after all, I am in the automotive industry and I do have to talk cars every now and then. It's like, how many traffic jams have you been in over the course of your life, and however you reacted when you're stuck in traffic? And what has that been like for you? But every traffic jam is created unique. It's a particular moment in time that you are going through now that you will never go through exactly the same way again. And so it may resolve itself quickly. It may take forever. It may be the longest one you've ever been in. It may be the shortest one you've ever been in. It may be caused by an accident. It may be caused by, some other situation, some natural disaster, a tree fell into the road. It could be any number of reasons why. And the people in the cars ahead of you are unique people that have never been ahead of you or behind you before. And so the overall situation itself is always unique, is always different. And so what's good in that moment is to simply pay attention and then to figure out what you do and don't have control over so that you can move through it the best way that you can. And as always, I believe when working through any difficulty or any difficult situation, so that you can get to your goal, so that you can ultimately get to your destination that you were trying to drive before the traffic jam, threw you behind on your timetable. It's just to be fully expressed, to have the vulnerability, set the table, let people know, using your hands-free dialing, of course, because now you're driving the car, let people know you're going to be late. You've done your best. You've done your best to be on time. You've done your best to be there when you were supposed to be there, but now that's not happening. So what can you do instead in this moment? Maybe not too much, maybe a lot. Maybe there's an alternate route that you could take. You can take the moment to evaluate that while you're stuck, and to think through, what is the best next thing for you? Understanding also that intent and impact are two very different things. So when dealing with difficulty that comes from other people, when you're dealing with me, if I'm the one who's been difficult to you, or you're dealing with some other difficult person, what is their intention? And how is that different maybe than the impact that they're having on you? Staying curious, staying open-minded, and really trying to understand as many different aspects of the situation as you possibly can are going to help you to work through whatever difficulty you're experiencing, and to understand the nuances and the beauty in the difficulty, because sometimes difficulties are what give us the motivation to actually make profound changes to who we are as human beings, to our lives, to our goals, and they actually allow us to achieve things. So sometimes the short-term difficulties that we experience that frustrate us to no end are actually the most beautiful gifts that life could possibly give us. And until or unless we work through those in a mindful way, we'll never be able to experience those benefits. And sometimes the biggest lessons come from people difficulties. They come from people who we didn't think had anything to teach us or that we had anything to learn from. But ultimately, a lot of times, what a difficult person does, even if they're truly not a great person or not a great person for you, is they show you ultimately deep down who you are. And that getting to know yourself can be a very beautiful side effect of having gone through a difficulty or an interaction with a difficult person. So I want to get to know you. How did this land on you today? Let me know. Would love to hear from you about what difficulties you're going through and how the 4 R's that we talked about today might enable you to make changes and to work through it, and to get where you're going in life, how you're recognizing, refraining, relaxing, and ultimately resolving the things that you're going through. And while you think about that and maybe make some comments to me, I'm going to read you just a little thing here. I've got this little pocket book that I carry with me everywhere, which is pretty great because none of my other books are really even unpacked. They're in boxes. It says, however young, the seeker who sets out upon the way shines bright over the world. But day and night, the man or woman who is awake shines in the radiance of the Spirit. Meditate, live purely, be quiet. Do your work with mastery, and like the moon, come out from behind the clouds. Shine. And that's what I wish for you today. Shine. Talk to you later. Cheers.